Hello and welcome to our virtual Idea Fest brought to you by the students of Communication Studies 290 at DePaul University, autumn 2020. I'm Deborah Siegel-Acevedo, your host, and again, I've had the privilege of being these students' professor during a time of tremendous pain and hardship and loss. But many of us who teach know that we get to see glimmers of hope amidst all the despair. And these students who are about to light up your virtual stage with their ideas for change and their own humanity are themselves beacons of hope. Our theme today, Becoming More Human, Student Perspectives on Change, comes to you straight from them. They titled it. They've poured their hearts into these talks. They've brought their full selves to this table amidst a pandemic when they've had so much else going on. And that alone inspires me. As a nation and as individuals, we need to do so much better on so many fronts. And these students are voices of change, reminding us front and center that we can do better and be better, that we can take better care of each other, take better care of our collective future, and take better care of ourselves. And with that, I give you these humans. As each one of them completes their talk, I invite you to send them accolades, vibes, hearts, messages of support, kudos, all the things that we would normally do in the form of applause, but that we have to bend to do differently when we're presenting virtually. Warm thanks to my brilliant collaborator at Girl Meets Voice, Shauna Franks, who served as our guest instructor and as our director. And thank you again to Leah Palmino and Jen Himes and the College of Communication, our producers and sponsors. And finally, one last note to my students. It's been an honor working with you. Thank you for helping us, and thank you for helping me become more human simply by knowing you.
Hi, I'm Georgia Coriel, and I am a people pleaser. There is nothing that I love more than when people like me, or even better, when people are in love with me. I've been a people pleaser my whole life, and I bet I will continue to be one. Being a person who says yes to everyone and to everything has led me to lose myself. My sophomore year of college, I was stuck in an emotionally abusive relationship, and when I think back to that time, it's not cute. I've never really been a confident person, but just when I thought I was getting somewhere, he came around and ruined it. I was called every classic insult in the book known to womankind. Things were thrown, there was constant yelling and crying, and I even got to see the classic image of an angry white boy punching his fist through the drywall. The things he said to me were just one element of it. I became extremely depressed, and I was tired of fighting to hang out with my family and friends. So it just got easier to cut everyone off. So I did, and I was met with the worst depression spell of my entire life. I could no longer feel joy, I lost 10 pounds, and I just didn't feel like myself for so long. As our 1-year anniversary approached, my best friend told me that she no longer wanted to live with me the following year, and in that moment, it broke my heart. As I look back on it, it was what I needed to hear. But I've never felt more alone in my entire life. And in that, I realized something. This wasn't going to work because I missed my life. So I fought my inner monologue for a couple days after that. Like, is it really worth cutting off the only person who seems to care about me? So I talked to everyone about it. I called my sister about it. I finally admitted it to my best friend. And it's funny because they all said the same thing. Get out. I thought that leaving the relationship would solve all of my problems. It turns out not to be the case, as is typical. Victims who free themselves from abusive situations, the cycle of violence continues in their head. And a study done on the consequences of an emotionally abusive relationship show that abuse always leaves a trace in our brains, and victims are more susceptible to things like PTSD, eating disorders, depression, and many more psychological consequences. The year after my emotionally abusive relationship was the hardest year of my life. Abusers love making people feel like nothing, and victims tend to internalize this. And the tension building phase, which comes before the explosive period, is a period where abusers get really angry, they get really argumentative, and victims are really apprehensive about what is going to happen. So I spent a year walking on eggshells and listening to my ex-boyfriend's comments about my personality, my fashion choice, and my body. So that when my life got back to normal, it was like, how do I even act? 74% of girls feel under pressure to please someone. 74%. That's a lot. Our society makes women feel that they should value romantic relationships over educational experiences. Our society caters to men, and women feel under pressure to please men. I mean, take any Woody Allen film, for example. Although wildly popular and considered classics, they represent women as objects and solely sexual beings. In my own experience, I had to build my own confidence back up. So the first step of this was surrounding myself with positive media. So I listened to women tackling sexism on podcasts in the shower. I unfollowed social media accounts about things or people that made me feel bad about my body or about my personality. And I read books, I read articles about things that empower me. We live in a day where 95% of our time is spent inside with limited social contacts. What a better way and what a better time to work on ourselves, being that might be the only person that we see. I hope that we can use this ample amount of time to reflect on ourselves. Who makes us happy? What makes us happy? What do we love about ourselves? The ability to love ourselves is what makes us more human. So that when we go back into our busy lives, we remember what matters most to us, ourselves.
Dear corporate America, I speak to you as one of the millions of young people who found himself unemployed consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Together, we account for a third of the rise in the unemployment rate. Last fall, I landed my dream internship at a law firm in downtown Chicago. Not only was this internship relevant to my career aspirations, but it was also indefinite and it paid. I treated it as my full-time job and soon fell in love with the work. My coworkers became like a second family to me. All that changed in March of this year as coronavirus started wreaking havoc around the world. I lost my internship along with my income, pride, and my purpose. A week prior, I signed my very first apartment lease in anticipation of working over the summer. With no more income and no relief in sight, I dug myself deeper into a pit of despair, which I still feel to an extent 9 months later. Luckily, I had my family to fall back on for support, but not everyone was as fortunate. I do not fault or envy you for having to make difficult decisions, including letting employees go in the interest of surviving the pandemic. However, those decisions and the ones you will inevitably have to make in the future must start embracing compassion and dignity. Doing so is the true embodiment of becoming human. Set your expectations at the start. What pained me the most after being let go was the apparent departure from company culture. I thought we were a family, but family sticks together through the thin and the thick. The bonds formed at happy hour and company parties make an involuntary departure that much more trying to process and accept. Communication is also key. Just as it is vital during standard operation, communication with employees let go by no fault of their own is the minimal form of dignity and respect. To this day, I have not heard if I will ever have the chance to return. Infrequent updates would have been better than no updates at all, and would have given me hope as I cope with the feeling of not having a purpose. Employees deserve to know when to close one chapter and begin anew. To my fellow young people who remain jobless, let's face it, we've all experienced rejection in one form or another. Though the future remains uncertain, we are still young and have the rest of our lives ahead of us. Days before I graduated from high school, my teacher gave me a card in which he wrote, "Tough times never last, tough people do." These times are tumultuous for us all. While there is room for critique of some of the business practices that transpired, we all must give grace to one another, and that is how we become more human.
Hi, my name is Lupe, and I'm a professional clown. I'll give you a little summary of why. When I was 15, I decided I was no longer happy drawing on paper, so I decided to paint on myself. Some practice later, my mom told everyone, and next thing you know, I had my first job as a face painter. The client paid me $100, so I was hooked from there. The second client texted me asking me about my rates, and so I texted back, like 8 out of 10, I do a really good job. He wasn't asking me to rate myself, he was asking about money. So, when I started college, I saw an ad on Indeed for an entertainment agency, and I was hired immediately. They had me learn to make things like balloon animals and dress up in different costumes. I've gotten to be a scientist, Spider-Man, Elsa, DJ, magician, and anything that falls under the umbrella of being a clown. But it wasn't until I really looked at my Snapchat selfie camera and saw a red nose painted on a girl in a yellow jumpsuit, and it really sank in. I wasn't just dressing up for a job, I was a full-blown, big shoes-wearing circus clown, and I rejected it. But I love it. I get to do the job of the outsider looking in, and this has been the job of the clown throughout history. The earliest clowns actually date back to 2400 BC in ancient Egypt. The earliest clowns were, believe it or not, also priests, and they were invisible. They could get away with anything outside the social norm, and no one would really bat an eye. So there are 3 types of clowns. The Augustine clown is the kind that parodies different occupations like baker, butcher, policeman, housewife, hobo. Me, a modern clown, I'm an Augustine clown, but my occupations are more Elmo and Elsa. So the ability to be this clown, these characters, is like being a friend outside your inner circle, where I have an identity but no one really knows who I am, and that gives me the freedom to observe people's nature. Similar to a doctor, how you're honest with them, or how you vent to a teacher. It's confidential because you may only see me once or once a year. So people are happy to welcome this stranger into their homes to eat their food and participate in the celebration. They're amongst their friends and family, and me being there doesn't change that. They're themselves. So when I work, I read the room and I get a sense of what these people are, who these people are, what to say, what not to say, and I adjust to the group's personality. I see individual groups that are individualistic and more that are community-based. And I'm sure you've all heard of what other cultures do, their things, or you've seen it on TV and you can guess the way they think or act, but you don't really know until you see it with your own eyes. So to get a sense of people, you gotta be around them, and I've been around a lot of people. I've been to parties where the houses smell like cigarettes and there's little to no effort put into clean. I've been to parties held in mansions where there's a literal marble staircase and it takes you up to a ballroom. And parties for Waldorf kids, the kind that don't use technology. And parties where the birthday girl of Genesis turns out to be 75 and we're in a nursing home, but we have a great time. I've learned the different games people play and the different ways people sing happy birthday, dance to instructions, and how often there's diversity at these parties and how much the honored guest has to be highlighted with importance, and synthetic versus real happiness that I see in people's eyes, and the level of compromise they allow. At lower income parties, I notice a lot of brands and expressions of wanting. There's a lot more iPhones and emphasis on importance, and overall I see a lot of synthetic happiness. According to the Harvard professor Daniel Gilbert, natural happiness is what we get when we get what we wanted, and synthetic happiness is what we make when we didn't get what we wanted. It's a compromise. In these kids' faces, I also see a lot more satisfaction when they receive what they want, but it's a surprise to them. And sometimes it's still synthetic happiness after that, but when it's natural, you can really tell. At the more elaborate parties I've gone to, I've seen lots of cheese, decorations, and room for compromise. You could argue that they have more natural happiness because they have better stuff, but to me, it's always sunk in as synthetic. And they're not really into highlighting anyone. The parents might tell me to the side, let them go first for things. But we get what we get and we don't get upset. And that's more expected than expressed. The celebrations where I see the most natural happiness are the ones that fall in the middle. And by middle, I don't mean middle class, I mean middle people, the middle ground people. The parties where the hosts make it evident that they want the celebration to everyone be happy, be involved. And those parties really feel like they have the most, human community, human nature. And now that we're going into the digital age, I do birthday parties on Zoom. So besides being inside for so long, inside of a country where it's becoming more individualistic as we don't share experiences with each other, we're in our own circles. So if you're going to take anything away, take this away. Quit your job and paint that red nose back on, because it is the only way. Okay, no. But when there are celebrations again, I am asking you to step outside yourself, not what you're wearing or your status, and make a real effort to put yourself in groups where you may feel like you don't belong, but have empathy. My job is the outsider looking in, but a clown not only blends in, it emerges in. So embody the purpose of a clown as someone who is knowledgeable, maybe where no one suspects it, and allow yourself to be emerged to really see each other as human.
Imagine for a moment that your loved one was administered morphine while in a hospital, and the healthcare workers failed to communicate this amongst themselves. Imagine what could go wrong due to this negligence. Imagine how easily that this could result in death. Hi, I'm Awen, and I've experienced a very similar situation. I was hospitalized for a rare blood infection and anaphylaxis. I was given morphine, and when I was transferred via ambulance to a different hospital, the paramedics had not been informed about this administration. This wouldn't be the first time that healthcare workers failed to communicate on my care, and it would not be the last either. This is only one issue that plagues the U.S. healthcare system, and COVID has brought attention to it. Our doctors more than ever are getting to decide who lives and who dies, and personal biases are getting in the way. The groups most affected by COVID are racial minorities, and this is in part due to the lack of access to tests and care. Recovery periods are not taken seriously for COVID, and per person these can mean wildly different things. This is also true for those who have experienced pregnancy. The U.S. healthcare system is considered the worst out of developed countries, and our maternal death rates are on par with that as well. The CDC did a study from 2008 to 2017 that showed that 66% of our maternal deaths were actually preventable. This means that there's a lack of communication, a lack of access to adequate care, and a lack of trust. This is a problem for everyone because healthcare is a public issue, and it needs to start being treated as such. Distrust also lines up with how poor an individual's health is. A study done by Armstrong and et al. On PubMed discovered that distrust and poor health are correlated. Quote, distrust by our sickest and most medically vulnerable patients could be seen as a marker for healthcare system ill-equipped to provide for their needs. I've personally experienced this as a disabled person needing medical care very often. Distrust and a lack of communication will continue to put lives at risk if we do not start overhauling the culture around medical care soon. It is important for patients to feel heard and cared for by medical staff. If they do not, patients need to be able to have an option to find other physicians and also have channels for reporting maltreatment. Those who are under the age of majority also need to be able to have channels for self-advocacy and able to make some of their own medical decisions. So at the end of the day, patients are people, and much more than their medical history. I'm Awen. I'm much more than my medical history, and I'm a human just like you.
Life is a roller coaster. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. And now the ultimate cringe line of all. Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Now, these were all lines said to me after I had lost my mother. They're very deep, as you can tell. Personally, I don't find it that appealing to be dancing in the rain and getting wet like a dog, but I don't know what America finds fun anymore, to be honest with you. You have your lows in life, you have your highs in life, you have your lowest of lows and your highest of highs, but God forbid you're sad because America hates it. So do not be sad for too long. If you are, I would suggest moving to Pluto. That's where I heard all the crybabies go, but not here. No humans here, please. American culture, like I just said, hates people being sad. I've noticed so many self-help books on grief, 10 steps on how to get over a heartbreak, 5 steps on how to be happy again, but you don't just read something and then everything clicks. That's just not how it works in life. In different cultures, death is completely perceived differently. In the Jewish culture, there's this thing called Shiva. And that's when there's 7 days after someone passes away where you get to mourn and grieve and sit in your sadness. And then after the burial, there's this 30-day phase where you get nurtured. You're out of work. You have time and space from reality. And this is not the predominantly the American way. And it should be an American norm. In Central America, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, death is not a feared subject. In fact, death is celebrated. You are encouraged to talk about your loved one and the memories you've had with them. It's not feared like it is in America. So what I'm trying to say is healing is not a linear process at all. And you should not force yourself to rush it because society's making you. That's what I did. And that's not healthy at all. It catches up to you and it eats you alive. Believe me when I say that. I was coping with loneliness, anxiety, grief, depression, suicidal thoughts, and I thought to myself, well, no one wants to be around the sad girl. So I'm just going to be okay, I guess. Psychologists and proven data show that 57% of people are still dealing with grief after 3 years of losing someone. 3 whole years. Grief doesn't just end when the calendar hits month 13. It doesn't just disappear. So let yourself feel it. Let yourself talk about it. Write it down. Let yourself cry and be emotional. Make mistakes or be alone because that's okay. You're a human. Have a healthy support system. Favorite teachers, mentors, therapists, because therapy is okay. Friends, family, people that won't make you feel guilty for feeling the way that you're feeling, but instead listen to you and hold you. The concept of time and healing is also bullshit. Time does not heal all wounds. This is a wound you're going to deal with for the rest of your life. This is a void that's within you because you lost someone you love. Grief is like a monster. You can't kill it, but you can learn how to tame it. You can learn how to live again and be happy if you learn how to cope and live differently. Because after all, you're not going to be the same human you used to be before them. So the more you process your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions and let it take its own course, the more you're going to realize that the puzzle pieces are starting to fit together. You're learning how to live a whole new life. And just because you're broken and you're in pain and you have this void in your chest does not mean that you're not a warrior. In fact, it is what is making you a warrior. You're a fighter. So embrace your pain, embrace your sadness, embrace your mess, because emotions are, after all, what fuel creativity, projects, and beautiful ideas. Look at Picasso, look at Van Gogh, brilliant artists that were considered complete nutcases, but created everlasting art that we still cherish and look at today. So maybe you won't be Picasso, maybe you won't be Van Gogh, but I just want to tell you that you shouldn't be afraid because, after all, your mess is the most beautiful thing about you.
Thank you from all of us for being here. Thank you to DePaul. Stay human, everyone, and we'll see you at the next event.